EWA 517, do you want to report a UFO? Over.
Negative. We don't want to report.
Look, it wasn't my worst Wednesday night.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Anomaly-NOW, transmitting to you from Austin, Texas. I'm your host, Miles Lewis. This is the weekly news and media roundup for the 501c3 nonprofit Scientific Anomaly Institute, aka the Anomaly Archives. Hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday season. The holiday season is still upon us, obviously, and it's just a headlong rush until the new year, 2026, coming at you fast. Well, I came within 12 feet of a bobcat over my Thanksgiving festivities. That was really, truly amazing and exciting. Was blessed to witness that beautiful creature so close. Thank you to the alerts of the hawks and crows screeching their alarm bells. Anyway, well, we've got a ton of stuff and gonna rush right into it, but I wanted to also say, I mentioned last episode that our new good friend Gail Neeson had resurrected for the final issue of her 1990s era Houston Sky UFO newsletter. Well, hey, why is it backwards? Wait a minute. That camera is not supposed to be backwards. Yeah, that's not right. Wait a minute. Okay, here we go. Yes, the 12th and final issue of Houston Sky, 30 years delayed. Thank you, Gail, for sending this to me. I really had such a great time reading it over. I'm really excited for something like this to be out there in the world again. Just fantastic. It's about 12 pages. Is that right? Yeah. 12 pages for the 12th issue. Cover article, brief by Gail Neeson, Ufology, the last 30 years from the tabloids to the Pentagon, filled with lots of little quotes and interesting tidbits here and there. There's the unexpected leap quote from J. Allen Hynek circa 1972. When the long-awaited solution to the UFO problem comes, I believe that it will prove to be not merely the next small step in the march of science, but a mighty and totally unexpected quantum jump. So much great stuff. Oh, and on hierarchies, a great quote, Charles Fort, Book of the Damned, 1919, I think we're property. But as usual, just a great bunch of stuff here. Flashbacks to materials from the past 11 issues of Houston Sky, an interesting UFO sighting report from a friend of Gail's circa 1976. 6 UFOs rise from Acapulco Bay, and the meat of it being synopses from various leaders in the UFO field, many of whom sadly have passed on, but each entry was their synopsis of their beliefs at the time, back in 1996 when she was first gathering material for this 12th issue. And some of those people include Richard F. Haynes, W.L. Barney Garner, Larry Bryant, Francis Ridge, Stanton Friedman, and Philip J. Klass, among others. Just so much great stuff in here. really so happy to see something like this. It really gave me so much joy. There's a nice UFO notebook column by William D. Bill Eatwell. Thank you, Bill, for your support of the Anomaly Archives, and thank you, Gail, for your support as well. Bill Eatwell's column is UFOs, a possible extraterrestrial threat. So much more in here. Oh, and there's a bit here by Tom Dooley that I was going to go ahead and read. Thomas P. Dooley, retired Navy officer and nuclear power specialist, established abduction ambient monitoring project, co-founder, board member, Fund for UFO Research, board member, Mutual UFO Network, radiation section of MUFON Field Investors Guide, admin, CFM Coalition, that's the CUFOS, FUFR, MUFON Coalition. He's also, thank you, Tom Dooley, the person who helped get the Bob Gerard collection donated to our archive so many years ago. Quote, Tom says, regardless of the seeming advances in the study of UFOs, after all these many years, the phenomenon has pretty much remained stagnant in terms of what we really know. The basic report of an object in the sky or near the ground still leaves us without a reasonable, plausible explanation of just what it was that was perceived and what its nature might be. We may pretend we have an inkling as to what it is all about, but unless we work much harder and much smarter, other tens of years will pass before anyone will be able to step forward and say, I now understand. My hope is that after the passing of the present madness that has surrounded an important portion of my life's work, there will be a restructuring of perspective and a focusing of goals that will allow the hard workers looking for the truth to finally get started in advancing a science. Working in this business with honest diligence has been the most sobering and humbling experience of my life. I anticipate at least several more years of work. I hope I'm here to hear the words, I now understand, by whoever may say them. Anyway, yeah, great other stuff by Carl Flock, Lucius Farish, Jim Mosley, and so many others, including Eugenia Macer Story, Robert Durant, Leo Sprinkle. And there's a little bit about Anomalous Archives in here that makes me very happy and proud. And I just, everything about this issue of Houston Sky, issue 12, is just so wonderful, and a wonderful flashback to the way things used to be. Thank you, Gail. And need to put the PO box in the show notes, so folks, and on also the page for where don't we have that right here? Yeah, here we go. Yes, of course, you can find out more about the Anomaly Archives at our website, anomalyarchives.org. We've got tons of information online. We have a patreon.com/Anomaly Archives account. You can follow along the news headlines at our Flipboard. That's flipboard.com/@Anomaly Archives, and click through and see all the thousands and thousands of links there, news articles, so much to get through. You can go to our website and see more on Houston Sky there, links to scanned copies of all the past issues, numbers 1 through 11. And just really, it really made my holiday. So, all right. And yes, we've recently been celebrating Giving Tuesday yesterday, this being December 3rd, 2025, a Wednesday, per our usual Wednesday show of this Anomaly-NOW variety. There's links at our website. You can always donate. It doesn't have to be Giving Tuesday. We always need the help, and we'd appreciate it if you'd consider donating either via PayPal or Facebook, or if you scroll down on the page, you'll find links to how other ways to support us, including PayPal, and as well as our PO box, where you can send old style checks. So, don't send cash through the mail. That's dangerous. However you want. All right. Well, let's see. I also want to draw people's attention to, of course, I think last time we mentioned that Greg Bishop's Anomaly Academy lecture from last year, October of last year, Can hard data and materialism solve the UFO mystery, the UFO enigma? That is available now for the public, previously only available to our patrons through our Patreon account. And now we also have made available Joseph Green's lecture, A Theoretical Approach to Conspiratorial Thinking. And you can find all the ones that we've uploaded, starting with our first one, June of 2024 with Brent Rains, July of 2024 with Professor Wham, Joshua Cutchin presenting an old lecture from 2014 featuring Rob Riggs on the Texas Bigfoot Enigma. And as I said, Greg Bishop and Joe Green's are the most recent ones added to our public Anomaly Archives YouTube channel feed. So check that out. Lots of great material over on our YouTube channel. So, all right. Well, I did want to draw your attention to the review of the recent Saul Foundation, the SOL 2025 conference that was held over in Italy. Our good friend Greg Bishop has written a review that's posted over at the SUAP, Society for UAP Studies.org website. Excuse me. And man, it sounds like it was a beautiful, amazing event there in Italy. Very much highlighting the international, global aspect of this UFO phenomena. As he says here, Greg writes, in an effort to recognize the efforts and accomplishments of the international community, the US-based study and policy group known as SOL chose this classy European venue to convene their third annual symposium on all things related to the subject of UAP. Judging by languages heard during frequent breaks, about half the attendees traveled from the United States. Others arrived from Germany, the Netherlands, Norway, the UK, Spain, Portugal, and the Ukraine, among others, to share their views and information about the UAP enigma, which has always been international. He mentions the talk by Beatriz Villarroel, as well as U.S. Army Colonel Carl Nell, and also chairman of the Association Aéronautique et Astronautique de France, Luc Denis, reported on physical observables that his group in the longstanding French government UAP study called GEPAN, that's GEIPAN, I'm not going to try to pronounce the French version, have done with decades of data using UAP as a matter of physical presence and not simply illusory. Lots of other great anecdotes from this fantastic conference. Of course, I think most of us have heard that Dr. Diana Pasulka did present as well, but she did so remotely. And she talked about the importance of the history of Marian apparitions and miracles, quote, as an excellent source of data to compare with UAP. And there were, of course, presentations by one of the SOL founders, Saul Foundation founders, Gary Nolan. In the evening, Nolan sat down for a chat with Jake Barber from the Skywatcher Group, an organization of ex-military personnel who are claiming continued interactions and recordings of apparent UAP at undisclosed locations in the southwestern United States. Spoiler alert, at least one of them is in West Texas. Barber said that they had recently tracked an object traveling at, quote, 8,000 miles per hour, according to their instrumentation. One of their goals is to allow anyone to have a firsthand experience of the phenomenon through techniques they are developing. Asked about the science behind their method of research and reporting, Barber said, if we can get to a place where we have a meaningful impact, then we don't care about peer review, unquote. I thought there was something else from Barber in here, but maybe I'm misremembering. Let's see. Nope, that's, I guess, it. Well, anyway, you can read the rest of that over at societyforuapstudies.org under the headline by Greg Bishop, Across Languages and Landscapes, Reflections on Saul 2025. Of course, the big news, I guess, is folks have been, highly anticipating the arrival of The Age of Disclosure, quote unquote, an explosive documentary that reveals an 80-year global cover-up of non-human intelligent life and a secret war among major nations to reverse engineer advanced technology of non-human origin. So I did have the pleasure of watching this thanks to some local friends. We got together and watched it at a friend's house. And I must say, we had some amazing conversations after the presentation, after watching The Age of Disclosure. We also stopped at several points to answer questions or ask questions of each other. Did they say what we think they said? What's the basis for that? What do you think of that? So a really wonderful evening was had by all. And I must say, it is, as everybody is saying, an incredibly well done, highly polished production. It is a really professionally done documentary. That said, my feeling about it, I've not been very reserved about my misgivings about this post 2017 era that we find ourselves in, that seems so dominated by these specific voices from the military industrial intelligence complex. And they're focusing on military sightings, military encounters, and military witnesses, and the counting of everything in terms of a threat, and which certainly that is an important aspect of the UFO phenomenon. But there's been a less of a focus on the biologics, as David Grush, alleged whistleblower, has seeded our language with that term now to describe possible quote unquote alien bodies, or the pilots, the UFOnauts behind the phenomenon. There seems to be less talk about, the classic CE3, close encounters of the first, second, and third kind, these close encounters with entities associated with the objects, let alone, quote unquote, alien abduction, contact, bedroom visitation type experiences. There definitely seems to be a very deliberate distancing, jettisoning of any discourse on those subjects. What I also find really striking about this movie is you will never hear the word AWSAP, AAWSAP, which was the real main overarching program that was created with the $22 or so million that is constantly referred to now as ATIP. And, perhaps there's a very clear explanation that I am not privy to. Maybe it's in Lou Elizondo's book, Imminent. Maybe it's in Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. But this Age of Disclosure documentary really focuses on the work of Lou Elizondo, his boss, Jay Stratton, but then Lou Elizondo became the boss, and Chris Mellon. Their efforts over time at the end of this program, after it was defunded, it's so confusing. As we're going to see when I reference the works of Jacques Vallée, there seems to be a lot of confusion and mystery and gaps in the official record of what actually went on during the period that Jay Stratton and particularly Lou Elizondo were involved. But obviously these have all been points of contention and controversy. But yeah, nowhere in this program, The Age of Disclosure, this documentary, will you hear the names James Lakatsky or references to OSAP, or even Bob Bigelow and BASS, BAASS, the program that got the money from Harry Reid's efforts to do this quote unquote Pentagon UFO program. Again, maybe there's a misunderstanding here on my part with regards to the differences between this effort done by Bass, this OSAP project, which then later becomes nicknamed ATIP. There's a lot of mystery here, folks. But yes, the documentary is pretty phenomenal. There's a lot of really interesting things in it. But I at the end of the day, the comment that I feel really encapsulates my feeling about it is this will be good for people who are new to the UFO scene and really haven't studied it deeply. If you studied it deeply, if you've read the works of Jacques Vallée, especially his journals, volumes 4, 5, and 6, yeah. The Forbidden Science journals 4, 5, and 6, when we're going to be quoting a lot from 5 and 6, then none of this is new. And it actually gives you a much clearer vision of the history and how these things have unfolded over the last several decades of this 80-year global mystery. So, but one of the big things that people are talking about is U.S. Air Force Lieutenant General James Clapper saying, "When I served in the Air Force, there was an active program to track anomalous activities we couldn't explain, many connected with ranges out west, notably Area 51. And so I do want to play this clip here that I believe is actually from the new documentary. And so I should stress that this is, of course, for fair use, public education purposes. Let's see here. It's only about 30 seconds.
About 32 years. And my last job in the Air Force was Chief Air Force Intelligence prior to becoming Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. When I served in the Air Force, there was an active program to track anomalous activities that we couldn't otherwise explain, many of them connected with ranges out west, notably Area 51.
Now, it's my understanding that may have been shot separately previous to all the other interviews in this documentary, that this was not, that was some other documentary or some other pre-existing footage where he mentions this. I could be mistaken, but that's my understanding. There's this Reddit thread where that clip you can view as well. Of course, this has gotten a lot of attention. Where is what I'm looking for? Yeah. Oh, dang it. Well, I don't have. Oh, yes. Here we go. Over at liberationtimes.com, U.S. Air Force silent on alleged covert UFO tracking program revealed by James Clapper. Christopher Sharp writes about this. Again, this is people trying to explore the issue of what Clapper was talking about, and in fact, you can find over on YouTube this Disclosure Foundation video put out by Chris Mellon, where he too is saying that this needs to be investigated. Why didn't Arrow uncover this? This is all very important and worth investigating. And I did want to draw your attention also to this Micah Hanks episode of his Micah Hanks podcast, the November 26, 2025 Age of Disclosure review episode. Of course, he's talked a lot more about it in other episodes as well, but in this one, and I do have a clip I wanted to play where he explicates some of the situation that relates to Clapper's comments and Mellon and the backstory there. So let's see if I can play that. Where'd it go?
But in the film, there are also some other intriguing statements that are made, and some which the media has been fixated on. One involves the fact that James Clapper at one point references there having been some kind of effort to try and track and resolve UAP sightings that were occurring over Area 51. And a lot of people, especially on social media out there, all the armchair investigators, were quick to point out what Clapper said and note that this is a huge revelation. This is the first time we've heard about this. Well, I will correct them and say it may be the first time you've heard Clapper specifically discuss that, but readers of my publication, The Debrief, may in fact remember having heard something like this before in the past. In fact, I was very intrigued when I first heard this because it first came to my attention when initially I was approached by Christopher Mellon with a lengthy essay that he wrote critiquing the first volume of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office's historical report on UAP. And in Mr. Mellon's piece, he wrote, I'll quote now, and this is available there at thedebrief.org so you can go read for yourself, but Mellon wrote, "A former director of U.S. Air Force Intelligence informed me that in the 1980s the Air Force undertook a classified UAP collection program in the vicinity of Area 51 in an attempt to ascertain the origin of UAP violating the famous base's restricted airspace. How come that program was not uncovered by Aero? How many other secret U.S. Air Force programs related to UAP were not uncovered? Where are those UAP reports, and how many others are there from other locations?" Now, naturally, I'm very glad that there's more attention being brought to this, especially with all the attention that the Age of Disclosure is getting, with all the downloads on Amazon Prime. But again, I just want to point out, although James Clapper was not quoted in that article by Chris Mellon at the Debrief, it is extremely obvious that that is who Chris Mellon was referring to, and now James Clapper has been revealed as the source of that information first reported by the Debrief.
So, yeah. Again, for those who've been deeply involved in looking at UFOs for a long time, there's a lot of us with a lot more background on this. And thus, we want to, again, point out the importance of the work of Jacques Vallée and his journals for Forbidden Science volumes 1 through 6, particularly volumes 5 and 6. I know I've referenced this many times on the show, and some of these bits I've read before, but I really do feel they give you a good sense of how long this information's been out there. And so something else that is in something else that's that Micah talked about in that episode is the reports of the Arlington Institute disclosure wargaming program, and this comes up. There's several things that come up in the Age of Disclosure documentary that deal with the idea of the Arlington Institute wargaming, of the idea of the government wondering should we finally disclose the truth, and what are the big ramifications, societal, religious, economic, and that sort of thing. And in the Wall Street Journal article that came out, was it scrap metal or an alien spacecraft? The Army asked an elite defense lab to investigate. This version of it's reproduced over at msn.com. There's their whole section on the Arlington Institute aspect of this, where they say Hal Puthoff, who also had a long history with exotic U.S. programs, creating one for the CIA in the 1970s, told Kirkpatrick's team of another mysterious incident that had fueled UFO belief. He said he had been invited to a 2004 panel in Arlington, Virginia, the type the government often quietly funds through think tanks to field new ideas. This one, Puthoff said, he was told was sponsored by the White House and given a very specific prompt: help the president decide whether or not he should finally disclose the existence of a crash retrieval program and assess the possible upheaval the revelation would ignite. What would be the effect on the stock market, on religion? Would aerospace companies sue the government into bankruptcy when they learned their rivals had decades ago been given access to alien technology? Now, again, that's a central theme of the age of disclosure. And it's one of the things that's being promulgated by Marco Rubio, who is one of the venerated people featured in the documentary. And this article goes on to quote, I believe Hal Puthoff, quote, "We added up all the numbers and we said, no way, we can't handle disclosure," Puthoff said in an interview. Kirkpatrick's team investigated whether the White House really sponsored such an event. The chief executive of the think tank that hosted the discussion, John Peterson, told Kirkpatrick a former senior Pentagon space official had notified him that President George W. Bush was preparing to make public all the secrets held by the government about aliens. "I was told that it was real, that it was happening," Peterson said in an interview. But months later, when Peterson asked the former official about the monumental truth about to be revealed, the reply was, quote, "I don't even know what you're talking about," unquote. Bush's chief of staff from that time told Kirkpatrick that he didn't know about the panel or any such plan to disclose alien secrets. Both Kirkpatrick and Peterson ended up with the only explanation they could think of. Arlington Institute and the panelists had been tricked. For what reason remains a mystery. So that's the version put out by the Wall Street Journal, mainly endorsing Arrow and Kirkpatrick's perspective that this was just, yes, this happened, but it's nothing like what has been described in terms of it being official from the government or from a particular president's initiative. But it's a very convoluted situation. There's so many references to this in Forbidden Science Volume 5 by Jacques Vallée. There's also the references to Bush, and all of this largely comes from either Hal Puthoff or Eric Davis. And the stuff related to George Bush specifically comes from Eric Davis. That also features in Age of Disclosure, wherein there are the claims that George Bush Sr. Was very aware of UFOs, had interactions with Colonel Corso, the man who allegedly seeded the crash retrieval materials to the aerospace companies for reverse engineering purposes, and also that he was aware of the infamous Holloman Air Force Base alleged UFO landing and interaction with beings that came off of one of the craft. This is an old story that goes back decades, I believe to the 70s, and Vallée being tempted by the carrot of disclosure back, I think, in the 80s, when the film, a famous UFO film, was going to feature this, because the Air Force or their contacts were saying, if you feature this in your documentary, we'll give you the footage of it that's never been seen before. Well, anyway, that's a whole other story. But so here's some of the bits from Jacques Vallée's Forbidden Science Journals, Volume 5, September 2003. These are things that relate to John Peterson of the Arlington Institute and these stories. A disturbing follow-on conversation at the Duck Club with Peterson upset that Joe Firmage spoke loosely about his meeting with the general, which happened, he said, 7 years ago, about 1996. The purpose of the meeting was to, quote, try to get some money, and was confidential. I had to point out that Joe, Bernie, Hal, and Ed Mitchell, plus the Greer people, were all talking about it freely, even mentioning there were, quote unquote, one or more secret UFO projects under Aldrich. Peterson retorted this made no sense. The general in question doesn't even talk to him anymore. The initial meeting had to do with several black projects, but he never said that he'd seen any hardware, and certainly not a craft. I'm thinking, speaking of the general. And then skipping over down on the next page, Hal has been part of a John Peterson semi-official scenario exercise that included role-playing, the press, the government, the military, etc., in various situations of potential ET contact. Now that's September 2003, and the Washington or the Wall Street Journal article was saying 2004 panel in Arlington, Virginia. So as we'll see, there actually are references to multiple exercises like this having been done at different times. What we just read was on pages 197, 198 of volume 5. Jumping ahead to page 227. It's a long one, I think. Las Vegas, March 2004. The Fiesta Rancho Casino Hotel on Rancho Drive. Hal and I had taken early flights in order to meet at the airport before others arrived. Without preamble, he told me Eric's story. Eric was the person who interviewed Wilson in the EG&G parking lot. He'd contacted the Admiral about his project to restart a chapter of AFIO, Association of Former Intelligence Officers in Las Vegas, and the topic drifted to ufology. Yeah, this is where it gets pretty crazy. Eric is now in touch with the vice chairman of the association, who is none other than former President George Bush Sr. They've spoken twice on the phone. The first phone call was initiated by Bush, who gave Eric some advice about AFIO and his future career. Eric told him about his interest in the Corso revelations. Quote, could it be that Corso was mistaken in dealing with the material he was handling? Could that have been Nazi hardware? Eric asked. Impossible, replied Bush. The two topics were clearly separated. By that time, 1947, all German secrets had been processed and filed away. They were not used as cover for anything else. That's all a quote from Bush, according to Eric Davis. Bush remembered General Trudeau. He showed interest in pursuing the discussion, asking Eric for his recent physics papers. He knew of the remote viewing project, but didn't recall Hal's name. The second conversation was more interesting because it got into the Holloman film, which remains a fixation for Hal, Eric, and me. The former president was aware of it. Was it a training film, a special ops exercise? No, he replied, quote, it was the real thing, unquote. There was a secret project and the security was obscene, quote unquote. Yeah. Again, that's page 227, March 2004. Again, that's the other thing mentioned in Age of Disclosure, these references to Bush as told by Eric Davis. And told to the whole NIDS 2.0 Bigelow gang, Hal, Eric, Jacques, etc. Flash forward to page 300, December 2005. Hal was recently part of a panel assembled in Washington under semi-official auspices to discuss the potential impact of publicly revealing the reality of UFOs. Attendees were broken up into 64 societal sectors and 8 subcommittees. Initially open to disclosure, all members ended up recommending secrecy because violent reactions to disclosure would be uncontrollable. Religious zealots would go on a rampage, clamoring for witch hunts. Hal doesn't know who organized the workshop or why. Yeah, that's shortly after this 2004 incident. And it says assembled in Washington as opposed to Arlington, Virginia. And then let's see, we have on page 333, Austin, Texas, October 2006. There's a long entry, part of which on page 333 says, over lunch, we spoke of nanobacteria and of the day after Futures study panel where Hal had participated. It had been set up by a senior advisor. As we enjoyed the fine Texas autumn day and excellent Mexican food, Eric mentioned that Bush Sr. recalled being briefed by Trudeau at the time of the 1968 Mendel Rivers congressional hearings. On the golf course, Colonel Trudeau told Bush, then a congressman from the 7th District of Texas, that one of his men, Colonel Corso, had been asked to testify before Congress and was about to reveal he'd received alien hardware from a UFO crash and distributed it to the industrial labs. As a result of this golf course conversation, the Corso testimony was quashed. Okay, so yeah, again, Eric with this supposed insider accounts from George Bush Sr., that go back to 1968. Bush supposedly having an interest in having interactions with Trudeau. Lower down on the page, October 2006. Let's see. The Trudeau-Bush senior conversation mentioned by Eric Davis would have related to the hearings before the Committee on Science and Astronautics of the House of Representatives held July 29, 1968. It was presided by J. Edward Roosh, and George Miller was the chairman of the full committee, where Alan Hynek was introduced by none other than Donald Rumsfeld. Miller had given a short address in the form of a warning, stressing that the committee wasn't set up to criticize the Air Force in any way. Okay, so those are the references I wanted to read from in Volume 5. And in Volume 6, there are some other interesting bits here. Okay, so this is Forbidden Science, Volume 6, page 111, January 2012. My inquiries about the sightings near Palmdale have led me to a certain retired vice president at Lockheed. Oh, yes. So, okay. So the other big thing, I remember watching The Age of Disclosure with my friends on Friday, 2 Fridays ago, whenever. The one thing that felt new to me in the documentary Age of Disclosure was the org chart, so to speak, for the quote unquote legacy program, the supposed decades long UFO reverse engineering program, and how it operated. There's it would be described as they discovered a hidden infrastructure run by a consortium of the CIA, the Air Force, the Department of Energy, and private aerospace contractors. A subversive government, as one insider put it, overriding the real government. This is from an article I'll mention in a little bit. But then so I'm still reading Forbidden Science 6. I'm barely, a fourth of the way through it. And I was like, well, that was new to me, so to speak. But then literally the very next day, I pick up Volume 6, Forbidden Science journals, and start reading it and come across this. Again, page 111 and 112, January 2012. Jacques writes, my inquiries about the sightings near Palmdale have led me to a certain retired vice president at Lockheed, a colleague of legendary aircraft designer Bob Rich, founder of the Skunk Works. They were once in charge of studying materials picked up from crashes in Nevada. Old story, he said. The method is simple. The Air Force would call them as cleared contractors, indicating where the objects were. They would go out with trucks, gather them up, and study the materials. For some reason, funding halted and the stuff was stored away. Like the Ark of the Covenant at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark. For a while, as the rumor goes, it was held at Class 3 storage facilities near Chatsworth. There was a contract to maintain the secure lockers. It didn't support science. So why was the research stopped? Here again, there's a straightforward answer. The military brass often shows a fundamental bias, while events like saucer interventions smell strongly of evil influence. But why not expose it then? I can only speculate about the answers. Yeah. To me, that really sounded like, and reminds me of what I was just saying is talked about in the documentary, that the CIA coordinated with Air Force and aerospace contractors and the Atomic Energy Commission this whole process. Okay. Now, I find all this very, very fascinating, obviously. And I was recently reminded, as I go through cataloging all these old videos I've downloaded over the years and photos I've downloaded and stuff like that, I come across a lot of material. And there's this video by a UFO disclosure advocate. In fact, this individual, Michael Sala, has this website, exopolitics.org, and I've never found him to be a very reputable researcher. He's just not on par. He's a believer, but okay. Anyway, this article, U.S. Navy plan to prepare for extraterrestrials among us, secretly developed in 1998. There's a video that goes along with this, and it puts forth some very interesting information. It's about 3 minutes long, and or three and a half minutes long. I'm going to play that right now.
Catherine Austin Fitts, a former Assistant Secretary of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, released on July 4 a document supporting her claims that the US Navy initiated a high-level strategic plan in 1998 to announce the existence of extraterrestrial life and that aliens live among us. She claims the plan was commissioned by the Undersecretary of the US Navy and was undertaken by the Arlington Institute, a small military think tank located near the Pentagon, where Fitts served on the board of directors. She was asked to assist with the plan and claimed she was given an opportunity to meet a live alien, but declined. In March 2008, I contacted John Peterson, president of the Arlington Institute. He flatly denied Ms. Fitts' claims and put me in touch with other members of the board of directors to get independent confirmation. Joe Fromage, a successful entrepreneur from the dot-com boom, also denied Ms. Fitts' version of events and did not recall any meetings where she was also present where the issue of extraterrestrial life was discussed. Peterson was especially insistent that Fitts had contrived the entire scenario. In response to the publication of my recent book on galactic diplomacy, where Peterson's and Fromage's denial of her account of the Navy plan was discussed, Fitts decided to release the minutes of a board of directors meeting held at the Arlington Institute on April 10, 2000. The minutes of the meeting confirm that the Arlington Institute was discussing extraterrestrial contact scenarios in at least one board of directors meeting, as Fitts claimed. Importantly, the minutes confirm that the Arlington Institute was doing work for clients that involved various scenarios of extraterrestrial contact. According to Ms. Fitts, one of those clients was the US Navy. In private email communications, John Peterson confirmed that Fitts did participate in a Navy project conducted by the Arlington Institute and that the extraterrestrial contact issue did come up as a future scenario. However, he pointed out that there was no strategic plan commissioned by the US Navy to prepare the public for extraterrestrial contact as claimed by Fitts. There remains substantial differences between Catherine Fitts and John Peterson over the extent to which the US Navy interest in extraterrestrial contact issues was part of a strategic study, as Fitts claims, or simply part of ad hoc discussions, as Peterson contends. The official board minutes released by Fitts nevertheless does lend support to her main claim that the US Navy commissioned a project with the Arlington Institute for its expertise on future scenarios involving extraterrestrial contact. It can therefore be concluded with some confidence that official efforts began in 1998 by the US Navy to prepare the general public for the reality that extraterrestrials exist and are living among the human population.
So the dates for all of this really, they're all over the place. It basically, you've got the stuff in the late 90s, you've got the stuff in the early aughts, early 2000s, and then something happening in 2003, 2004. Multiple wargaming workshop scenarios for disclosure being funneled through John Peterson's Arlington Institute. Well, here is a video of John Peterson called "A Historic Moment in Our Story: Postscript Insights with John Peterson" from the Postscript Arlington Institute YouTube channel. circa August 2023. And I'm going to play this other clip here of him. It's about 2 minutes long.
As I've told this story other places about many years ago, I was told kind of quietly that there was an organization within the government that had been very quietly and secretively working on the whole disclosure business, and they were going to do it on a particular date or time in October in a year. It's an election year. It was an October potential October surprise, right? That could throw the election one way or another. And it was hard to know why anybody was telling me this in retrospect. I think they were just giving it to me to try to see what I'd do, because I don't think it was true. But in any case, what I did do, because I had the Arlington Institute up and going at the time, is that I invited some of my high-level friends from out of the Washington area. Well, they weren't all from Washington, some from other places, and I essentially, in some cases, literally called them up and said, "You just be here next Tuesday afternoon at 1 o'clock. And I can't tell you why, but you'd be here." And I had enough of a relationship with these people who were really quite very senior scientists in the military and intelligence and media and other kind of things to get them all. I don't know, there were 8, 9, maybe 10 in the room. And we spent the whole afternoon using a relatively sophisticated piece of technology to think through in a systematic way all of the potential implications of this kind of disclosure process. If in fact that's what had happened.
Yeah, and that's part of a very long video. And this was largely in response to the 2023 hearings. And of course, now, we have Michael Schellenberger, who was one of the people who spoke at one of these UAP UFO hearings with this article. Secretary of State Rubio believes U.S. recovered alien tech and gave it to private military contractors. Quote, "We are headed toward massive disclosure," unquote, says a senior advisor to America's top diplomat and Trump's national security advisor. A number of people have spun the conspiracy theory that this could be an attempt by the current administration to influence the elections. It's an old conspiracy trope in the UFO community that who's going to be the disclosure president, who's going to be that historic figure to make this announcement, and would anybody believe it? And now, with such a divided country, divisive times that we live in, it's easy to see that half the country might believe it and half the country might not, depending upon how it unfolds. But and there's been also the suggestion that Mark Rubio has been walking back the statements that he made in the documentary. But he, in a recent appearance on the Sean Hannity show, he says he does not walk them back, but he did clarify that he hasn't seen any of this evidence himself. He's heard testimony from others who claim to have seen firsthand the evidence for these legacy crash retrieval reverse engineering programs. But there is a lot of talk that there could be some big revelation coming, and I will refrain from giving my opinion about this current administration, this president's possible revelations on this topic. We do have some links to articles, reviews of the documentary that speak to that issue specifically, but they're a bit more political than I want to get. But yeah, so you also might recall hold on. That when Schellenberger appeared before the hearing, the UFO hearing, he submitted this document. United States Department of Defense and the intelligence community are withholding information about anomalous phenomena from Congress. Testimony by Michael Schellenberger to the Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Information Technology, and Government Innovation, and the Subcommittee on National Security, the Border, and Foreign Affairs of the House Oversight and Accountability Committee for a hearing on unidentified anomalous phenomena exposing the truth, November 13th, 2024. And in this 212-page document that is basically a massive collection of publicly available information. It's a really nice amassing of this kind of information that we've been covering, and a lot of what we've covered is in here. And in this 212-page document, there are 25 references to John Peterson, including as far back as this 1993 reference to the Lindbergh Foundation. Note, Lindbergh founded the Lindbergh Foundation, of which John Peterson was decades later the chairman. And this reference to December 1994, Jacques Vallée writes, there are two UAP projects being funded by Lawrence Rockefeller. One is run by Stephen Greer, which collects testimony from government insiders and works on UAP communication projects. And the other is run by Marie Galbraith, charged with obtaining, quote unquote, the best data. A later entry claims futurist John Peterson's ideology, C3 December 1999, is at play in the organization. Quote, the aliens are here, real good guys. We must be prepared. A revolution is coming. Disclosure, etc. And he notes, Peterson states he was twice the runner-up candidate to be the Secretary of the Navy, and he served in senior positions for a number of presidential political campaigns in the 1990s. Well, this is interesting because, as it says here, Peterson is also the founder of the Arlington Institute, TAI, a group connected to claims the Navy charged the Arlington Institute with figuring out a plan to disclose ET, quote, live among us, and claims TAI may have awareness of the conduit between private industry and government UAP work. Peterson is also a board member of the Lindbergh Foundation. Now, it's interesting that Peterson says that he was twice the runner-up candidate to be Secretary of the Navy, and that it appears that the allegation has been there, as you saw in that video clip, and these allegations from Catherine Austin Fitts, that when she served on the board of the Arlington Institute, that they were tasked by the Navy, and that it was the Secretary of the Navy who commissioned this war game workshop scenario, disclosure day after scenario, but then later denied it. Again, it's just, so I don't know. Is there something personal there with Peterson and the Secretary of Navy position? I don't know. But like I say, there's a ton of other references to Peterson in this document, including the ones referenced by Jacques Vallée in his Forbidden Science journals. And it just goes on and on. So there's just a lot of data there. And maybe it's just smoke, but I suspect there's a fire there somewhere. Anyway, we need to probably wrap this up, but there are some great reviews out there. Garrett of Patterns Tell Stories, UFO podcast, has his review, Age of Disclosure review, my thoughts on 2025's new UFO documentary, The Age of Disclosure. This is one of those that I won't really be quoting from because it does get into some very important political issues, but there's a lot of good data here that I think is worth your time and energy. I think Garrett and Klaus of Patterns Tell Stories have done a pretty good job of covering this stuff, though their production on their show has kind of dropped off of late. Life gets in the way, right? But some very interesting stuff here, including, of course, the telltale references to people like Michael Flynn and Peter Thiel and Colonel Colonel. But among the other reviews, there's this other one over at Scraps from the Loft. that talks about the legacy program represents the ultimate hubris of the military-industrial complex, the belief that a small group of unelected officials has the right to gatekeep reality itself. Which also reminds me of, dang it, I think let me see if I accidentally closed one or more of the other reviews. Yes, this one from the Vatican Observatory website. That's vaticanobservatory.org by James Kurzinski. From the living room cinema, my initial reaction to the documentary, The Age of Disclosure, a documentary on the current state of UAP research and disclosure. He goes into a lot about, the specifics. There's some things in the Age of Disclosure documentary that kind of upset him or he thought struck him as, how do you prove that? What's your evidence of that? Namely, that the claim that the Vatican knows the truth about extraterrestrials, et cetera, something like that. And tries to give his reasons for why he doesn't think he's really a biased reviewer, but nonetheless, I did want to read the end of it here. He ends it with a few paragraphs that start, "So has my stigma and bias as a Catholic priest tainted this post? Perhaps. But I would like to conclude with a commentary that may surprise the makers of this documentary. There was a clear narrative woven of fear of what would happen if someday we learned that we are not alone in the universe. There was a presumption set forward that this would shake the foundations of how we would understand the world we live in. I disagree with this assessment. Polls can be found that 65% of people believe in life beyond our common home. Scripture teaches us that humans were not the only intelligent beings created by God. The Copernican revolution has already shaken our understanding of the world we live in, and it keeps on shaking. Science fiction literature has been a type of speculative think tank of not wondering if there is intelligent life other than humans, but how would contact with those beings unfold? If anything, if there is proof of intelligent life other than humans, this is another statement that deserves a reflective post. Last time I checked, whales and dolphins are rather intelligent, just different from human intelligence. Knowing what that is could actually bring clarity and calm to our world. We would no longer need to speculate about what is out there. We would begin the process of engaging an answer to this fundamental question instead of trying to develop intelligent speculations. So do I recommend this documentary? It is a bit pricey to rent online, but it is very gripping. I'm not one to either encourage or condemn media. If you do watch it, approach it with openness and a critical mind. I think there is a lot of fascinating things it presents that we need to take seriously. Sadly, the narratives at times were predictably typical of painting the tired cultural picture of power structures bad, rebel citizens fighting the powers that be good. Whenever I watch documentaries, reductionist narratives never bode well in whether or not I trust what I am watching. The reductionist narratives of this documentary The reductionist narratives of this documentary created my biggest hesitation at the end of this documentary. At the very end, there was a type of kumbaya moment when the call was made to look to the United States Congress to push for the truth. So the answer to finding the truth about UFOs, UAPs, is to trust the United States Congress. No disrespect meant to the elected officials of my home country, but that sentiment invites me to reiterate a recurring theme in this review. Italices. The most important factor in the believability of these types of extraordinary events is one's credibility and reputation. Another review by Charles Eisenstein at his Substack, UAPs and National Security. Again, I want to read just the very end of it. He tends to get a bit metaphysical and philosophical. But he says, earlier, I raised the idea that UAPs generate a separate inertial frame of reference in order to execute maneuvers that violate physical conservation laws, for example, of momentum. We can take the mind-bending notion of distinct coexisting realities further. I'll leave it to the reader to decide whether I am speaking literally or metaphorically in what follows, a distinction that is itself an obstacle to understanding. It isn't just that a public moving away from the story of separation is less susceptible to fear narratives, war rhetoric, and false flags. It is that malicious ETs and Illuminati controllers are ontologically excluded from the reality field that humanity generates as it heals, forgives, shares, and cooperates. They have increasing difficulty becoming real. Earlier, I mentioned the paradox that the idea of an evil world-controlling cabal feeds the us-them fear mindset that allows the cabal to wield power. But here is a deeper paradox. The myth of the cabal feeds the reality in which the cabal even exists. Can you get a sense of what is at stake here in the disclosure wars? We are in a struggle over reality itself. What shall be real? What shall exist? The relation between myth and reality is not what the story myth of separation holds. Narratives aren't just descriptions or interpretations of an external observer independent reality. They are co-generators of reality. Nor are they constructed merely of concept. They are organic parts of an embodied state of being, of consciousness, and of relationship. Therefore, the war over what is real is also a struggle for who we are. War, even struggle, is much too small a concept to encompass the magnitude of the drama we have entered. Indeed, that narration loops back into the same old story of separation. I'm sorry, it is hard to avoid New Agey or pseudoscientific wording here while maintaining brevity. So let me appeal to another source of knowledge. It is the conviction that we are not at the mercy of what they will do. We are not at the mercy of what they are. We are in a moment of choice. Fear-based calls for disclosure invoking extraterrestrial or foreign threats will not open the door we want to walk through. For that, we must inhabit a new story that no longer names us as discrete, separate units in a world of other, ever insecure, ever at war. When that shifts, amazing technologies of abundance will become available. In a sense, they already are available. Scarcity in this world is usually the result of maldistribution, not objective lack. It is the result of how we see and relate to each other. It is the result of who we suppose ourselves to be. So, in fact, the purpose of new paradigm technologies is not to bring about abundance. Quite the reverse. They will become available once we accept abundance, which comes from understanding our interbeingness. Then they become available for their true purpose, which is to vastly expand our creative powers. We will accede to those powers when we are ready for them. All right. Tons of other news that I'll put in the show notes for tonight's episode. Did I play everything I did? Okay. We've got cryptozoology links like Bigfoot sightings inspire new off-Broadway musical. Hunting for Bigfoot relies more on science than skeptics think. The FBI released Bigfoot's official file. The Beast of Ben Varden, Isle of Weird. Historians answer questions about the origins of meanings of mysterious creatures. Also great links in the consciousness, health, mind, body, psi, parapsychology connections topic area. Oh, yes. The terrifying reason many people don't have psychic abilities. I am very intrigued by this. This is a talk, I think, between Dean Radin and Whitley Strieber about Dean Radin's new research into the possible genetic underpinnings of psychic ability in humanity, and it being more a matter that, yes, everybody is psychic to a greater or lesser degree, but there may actually be a genetic component keeping those people who don't seem able to exhibit it from having the gene or the components. I'm sure this is going to be very controversial. It worries me even just saying that. But yeah, some other headlines like your brain is naturally telepathic, research suggests, meaning our minds are all connected, brain malfunction and miracles. And that's these two articles by, I believe, Peter Rojewitz. Oh, no, or is it Michael Grosser? I'm sorry. Am I getting right? An experience that blew my worldview, and other articles. Yeah, all kinds of stuff. Mind-altering brain weapons no longer only science fiction, say researchers. And some great frontier archaeology articles. Life on Earth began about 1 billion years earlier than previously thought. New research finds. I think that is, in fact, a article over at thedebrief.org. Neanderthals' disappearance may not have been from extinction. Controversial new study argues that also is over from thedebrief.org. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your tuning in. Please like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that good stuff. Please join our Patreon. Become a patron of the Anomaly Archives. If you can donate, that'd be great. You can go to patreon.com/Anomaly Archives. You can also find all the links to this and everything else over at anomalyarchives.org. Thank you so much. Good night.